All right, let's dive right in. So welcome everybody. So today we are talking about a very hot topic, if you can't tell by the number of people here today. I think we've got about 40 people signed up for this. So people from a lot of Seattle folks, New York, Texas, Portland, so people from all over. So super excited about this. There are many variations for DEI. There's IND, IED, DEIB for belonging, DEIA for access. But really what it comes down to is the presence of differences, the collective mix of differences as humans. So if we want people to thrive in our firm, we have to create conditions for belonging, which is why we've asked these three ladies here today, who are out in the DEI arena. They're making those changes. They're in the community. They're providing resources. They're donating their time like they're doing today. So we're going to dive in a little deeper, more than what it is, but how to tactics, committees that are out there, resources. So we're going to touch on a lot of different arenas and aspects. So some of these slides,
they're always going to be late. So
some of these slides we're going to kind of go through pretty quickly because there's just so much content, but they provided it just so you know what's out there. So you have something to refer back to. You can research it. They have their contact information. So reach out to them. They're more than willing to answer any questions if we don't have enough time. So with that, we're going to start with Crystal.
Hello, I'm Crystal Day. I'm an architect here in Seattle at Miller Hull, and I'm also part of NOMA Northwest. And if you're not familiar with NOMA, it's the National Organization of Minority Architects. It's actually been around for over 50 years. They started it at an AIA convention, I think in Detroit. Just talking about the same issues that we're unfortunately still dealing with today. Here in Seattle, we've had a lot of really successful Black-owned firms like Ben McAdoo and Leon Bridges and Mel Streeter. And back in 2008, a group of professionals here in Seattle convened to discuss the absence of this professional resource for minority architects. And so we started our own chapter here. And NOMA Northwest really advocates for more workplace diversity in the AEC industry and empowering marginalized populations. We help minorities of all ages explore career opportunities, including a couple of weeks ago, we had a project pipeline camp, which worked with middle school kids that were underrepresented groups, and we partnered them with design professionals to help them learn about architecture, and they were able to create their own designs and models and working with us. So that was good. Next slide. I like this quote from Maya Angelou: do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Next. This one we can skip. I know you guys all know this already. And also, this is an interesting slide showing the percentage of the US population that's women and Latino and African American, Asian, Native American versus who is actually licensed in architecture, with a huge disparity of Black women, actually. Next slide. Next slide. And really what I wanted to talk about today is the call to action. It's a set of commitments that the NOMA Northwest chapter set up a couple of years ago to start to lay down the foundation for reconstructing a more unified and anti-racist architectural industry. Next slide. Keep going. And so I'll dive into the prerequisites. You can go to the next slide. Some of the things that you would have to do to be with the call to action is conduct office-wide DEI training and establish a benchmark metric for your firm. So know where you're at right now and conduct cultural competency interviews, and especially start with leadership. The next is create a safe space for current and future BIPOC staff. And when I say BIPOC, that means Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Openly state that Black lives matter and follow up with actionable systemic changes. Don't make that just a statement for marketing like some firms do. Work towards transforming the workplace into a safer space, not just for BIPOC, but for all staff. Acknowledge that systemic racism and anti-Black sentiment and gender inequality have historically existed within the United States and continue to persist in new forms to the present day. We need holistic buy-in from leadership, from middle management, and from all staff on the urgency and reality of this issue. Be a co-conspirator every day by speaking up and showing up for your BIPOC colleagues. Acknowledge them, listen to them, validate, value, support, and amplify their voices inside and outside of your firm. This includes when you're at meetings and client meetings and job sites and within your communities and home and in all spaces. Next slide, please. Some of the foundational commitments. So after you've done the prerequisites, these are some recommendations that we have for your organization. Conduct at least 2 annual open to all firm-wide workshops on cultural competency. You should secure the services of a BIPOC expert or specialist on an anti-racist educational initiative. Develop a mentorship program with your firm and organization, or participate in external mentoring programs to connect and support BIPOC staff in their career development within the profession. Integrate BIPOC books, materials, and vendors into the office's circulation of reference materials. Acknowledge and support the BIPOC community's contributions to architectural history in the built environment. A lot of us that studied architecture know that we usually just learned about white men and not all of the architects throughout time. Develop, publish, and uphold clear metrics with path to leadership job descriptions. Make this accessible to all staff. Develop collaborative partnerships with HBCUs, that's historically Black colleges and universities, MSIs, minority serving institutions, I think, and local organizations, and attract Black and underrepresented BIPOC interns. Provide competitive salary and benefits. And actively recruit and provide equal opportunity for underrepresented BIPOC professionals for your primary services. Develop an equitable, diverse, and inclusive workforce. So diversify your recruitment and hiring. Diversify your staff and increase recruitment and retention of all BIPOC in primary staff roles, and especially diversify your leadership. So have an intentional promotion and retention of qualified BIPOC staff to leadership positions. Next slide, please. Some ongoing commitments you can have are to actively work to increase the presence of underrepresented BIPOC professionals and provide clear path to leadership frameworks. So this should be for your primary roles like project manager and senior associate, principal, or partner. Also for your secondary support roles like head of human resources, head of finance, head of marketing, and partner or collaborate annually with at least 2 Black or minority woman-owned businesses within the AEC industry. You should provide pro bono design and consulting services to BIPOC-owned organizations from historically disinherited communities of color each year. I think maybe next slide. I'm not sure where I'm actually. Become engaged at the state and local levels in public, in housing and education policy. Advocate for policies that promote integrated neighborhoods and legislation that benefits the growth and resources and infrastructure of all communities and demographics. We should all support BIPOC students at HBCUs, MSIs, and higher education institutions through mentorship, advocacy, scholarship, etc. Establish and uphold safe professional work environments for BIPOC staff by creating and distributing clear protocols for addressing microaggressions and implicit biases against race, sexual orientation, and religion. We should create project teams that include Black and underrepresented women and people of color in prime management, partner, or consultant roles. We need to allow BIPOC and minority women employees equal opportunities to make mistakes, learn and grow, and feel fully supported and valued while doing so. We should be respectful and accommodating of the needs of the BIPOC cultures and religions, and be intentional when including BIPOC staff in your firm and organization's marketing material, on your social media, and on other professional publications. Commit to ongoing cultural competency, learning, work, and long-term transformation, both at the individual level and organizational level. And we know that this work is difficult and requires critical conversations from leadership and staff. It requires a lot of internal reflection and long-term commitment to systemic changes. This is uncharted territory sometimes, and we need to be brave to go through this daily discomfort and uncertainty. We know that we're going to make mistakes along the way, and we need to challenge the complacency of the status quo. Ultimately, with courage, conviction, and struggle, collectively, we can reimagine and rebuild our profession. So if you are interested in learning more about the call to action, we call this the CTA, this is how it works. So you can voluntarily report to our organization, NOMA Northwest. Send out the form to NOMA Northwest Seattle at gmail.com, and you can go online at nomanorthwest.org. And the next slide. This is not meant to be a checklist. This is supposed to be an ongoing, actionable thing. Next slide. These are all the ongoing things that we would do. If you have questions, you can go to this website or email. And then on the next slide, we have some of the firms at the bottom there that have already signed up for the call to action pledge. Let me know if you have any quick questions, more deep questions we can save to the end. I know sometimes on this topic we can talk for hours, so we want to save those to the end.
Well, you did great. You like 4 minutes early, so amazing job. Anybody have any clarifying questions? Amazing job, by the way. I'm going to save my questions for the end.
Thank you. I'll hand it over to Margaret.
Awesome. Hello.
Hello. So my name is Margaret Knight. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an architect at Runberg Architecture Group. I have a history of involvement with AIA Seattle in general, specifically with the Diversity Roundtable Committee, whose goal is to really empower and promote diversity within the architecture profession. So if you go to the next slide, to complement what Crystal has been sharing about NOMA Northwest, their initiatives, the call to action, I'm going to share a few ways to engage resources for deeper learning, ideas to implement in your own offices through the lens of AIA National and AIA Seattle specifically. So starting with AIA Seattle, they have a whole set of racial justice commitments. That first bullet, I've linked to their entire list, so you can go to the website and check them out. For right now, I just wanted to highlight a couple of them that kind of stand out to me. One being their diversity and continuing education programming. So they've basically made a commitment to only host programming that feature women, non-binary people, trans people, and people of color. They're no longer hosting or promoting continuing education programs where speakers are all cis men or all white, which I think is really great and something to think about when bringing in programming to your own offices. The next one is the culture change and practice, which is a leadership cohort. I think it's like a 4-part series that's really geared towards firm leaders and firm owners. And that they put in place to really also help give firms the tools that they need in order to actually be able to complete NOMA Northwest's call to action. So that's a lot of asks in the NOMA Northwest call to action. And so this is one tool to kind of give you a little bit of a foundation on where to start with all of that learning that needs to be done in order to get there. And then the last thing is committee involvement. So AIA Seattle has like 27 different committees for a whole host of topics. I pulled out a couple of them that are more focused on EDI issues generally. The Diversity Roundtable is obviously the one that I'm personally most connected with. And in a minute, I'll go through some of the things that that committee is doing. But there's also the Asian American Designers Union, there's the Committee on Homelessness, Public Policy Board, Women in Design has the committee, there's the Justice and Equity for Diversity and Inclusion Council, and there's a Seattle International Architecture Forum. So that's just a handful of committees. They're all doing really great work in this sphere. And I also just want to mention, obviously, they're great resources to share with your office, but you don't actually need to be an architect or a designer to volunteer with them. So it's something that anybody that has an interest in any of these areas is welcome to attend a meeting, see what they're all about, figure out what those volunteer and engagement opportunities look like, and might be something that you're interested in checking out. So if you go to the next slide, the next few slides are just highlighting the Diversity Roundtable in particular. The first thing I wanted to, oh, sorry, if you go back one, is the Diversity by Design exhibit. So this is an exhibit that's, I think, has been ongoing since 2013, and every few years, the Diversity Roundtable puts out a new call for submissions. And basically, it's an exhibit that both showcases and really celebrates the work of underrepresented designers and architects in our local area. It was recently displayed. What this photo is from is at the Center for Architecture and Design. I just learned that it has recently been taken down, but there is a website where you can go online and check out all of the fabulous work that's been curated through the exhibit. And really the goal for this is to obviously spread the word about all of the great work that our local BIPOC community of designers and architects is doing, but it's also to start to shift that narrative of who can be an architect and what does an architect look like. So if you go to the next slide, is Architects in Schools, which is another program that the Diversity Roundtable does. It's very near and dear to me. It's really great because it also kind of highlights that important piece of how representation matters. So through this, Diversity Roundtable volunteers will actually go into schools that have high populations of youth of color and get them really excited about architecture and do some exercises, activities with them to teach them certain skills that they might need or be interested in if they were to pursue a career in architecture. But it also is just awesome to have them see people that look like them in the professional world and let them know that, like, yes, this is a career path that's open to them and that it's even an opportunity at all. The next slide is highlighting Hip Hop Architecture Camp, very similar in that it's youth engagement again. All of this is to kind of help this pipeline of getting more diverse architects in the door in school so that we can help increase the amount of diversity that we see in the profession once folks graduate and start getting jobs. But this is specifically a summer camp that the Diversity Roundtable has helped host. It took place at University of Washington. Really awesome group of kids that came in from all over, not just Seattle, but a little bit outside of Seattle as well, just for a week in the summer. And it's right at that kind of middle school age where they're starting to think about, high school and what they want to do and what they want to explore further. So other volunteer opportunities there. Next slide. And then the last diversity roundtable slide I wanted to share with you is about our community collaborations. I think Crystal touched on this about kind of providing pro bono work to communities of color and communities in need. And that's something that the Diversity Roundtable has a history of doing. So these photos show a couple of those community collaborations. The one on the left, both actually were in partnership with Sawhorse Revolution, which is another organization that provides carpentry skills to youth. So these are design build projects where Diversity Roundtable members helped provide design services. Sawhorse Youth helped provide the build. And then on the left one, we created a garden shed for the Danny Wu Garden in the Chinatown International District community. And on the right, we created a tool shed for Africatown in Columbia City. So two really great examples of kind of that community effort in progress. The next slide. So kind of zooming back out from AI Seattle, this is actually a really great resource that AIA National has put out. It's the Guides for Equitable Practice. Really good place to start to kind of just at your own pace, do a little bit of extra learning. They have 9 different chapters. They're all based on different topics, starting from intercultural competency, workplace culture, compensation, all the way up to how you actually measure that progress. And, you know, they're done by designers, so they're actually quite graphically pleasing and like easy to read. So I actually highly recommend checking them out. You can just download them as single PDFs for each chapter. And the way that I've seen some offices do this is obviously you can just individually, you know, have your own read of them, but some offices will do it kind of book club style where a group of folks will get together, they'll pick one of these chapters, everybody will read it, and then they'll just come and discuss and kind of talk through some ways like how they might implement changes in their own office, how their office culture might align with some of these things or not align with some of these things. And it really just serves as a good conversation starter. And, you know, sometimes you just need that catalyst to like get people talking about things. Okay, and then the last one, a lot of tiny font, is basically just a ton of additional resources. Most of these are from AI Seattle's website. I did add one of my own under personal resources. The last one on there is a training from the People's Institute. It's an Undoing Racism workshop, which I took at a last office that I worked at. It was actually mandatory training. I think that also came up in the NOMA Northwest's call to action is having this cultural competency training. And I think having it be a thing that every new employee takes and you know that everyone in the office has had the same training is actually really helpful in setting kind of like a baseline of education. You know, everyone's coming in at least with this same foundation, the same common language. So when issues around EDI, things in the workplace come up, you have this common language to discuss them together internally, and it feels more like kind of a safe shared space around it. So just wanted to leave that there. Obviously, you can peruse that on your own time later.
I love that you included that. I've actually heard about the training with the People's Institute, so check it out. Beautiful job. Anybody have any clarifying questions, any burning questions so far? All right, I'm gonna check the chat box really quick. Feedback, love that idea to get the whole office involved. Patrick commented on that. I agree too. And new employees, I think that's amazing. All right. Last but not least, moving on to Robin. Hi.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me here. My name is Robin Strom. I'm the diversity manager here at Anderson Construction. I first wanted to start out just how I got into this space and how I started working in this space. A while ago, I was on a washed out project which meant there were DBE goals and workforce goals. And DBE goals are basically how many disadvantaged businesses are utilized on the project. That's monitored and reported to WSDOT. Workforce is women and minority percentages, which is how many women and how many minority do you have working on your project? Also apprentice utilization. So this responsibility was thrown in my lap. Literally, I was in a staff meeting one day. The director of DBE compliance came in and did a presentation on the requirements of the project. And he asked that project team, who's going to manage this DBE and workforce goals on the project? And my PM said, well, Robin's going to do it. And literally everyone clapped, like I got a promotion, but it was not a promotion. So I knew nothing. I had to educate myself on what this all meant, because the project got audited shortly after, and it was scary. Imagine going into a room of 30 people and all of them are grilling you on a subject that you barely know anything about. The project remarkably passed the audit, which was nice, but I realized that there was a huge liability for me personally in reporting these goals on federal projects. So the project was a learning experience. A couple of things happened on that project. A DBE firm was close to shutting its doors because of that project. They had a $3 million contract and was not able to perform on the $3 million level. The project team worked really hard to pay them with joint checks to their suppliers, and it was able to keep them afloat for enough to complete the project. But, you know, I don't think that business is in business any longer. So that's very sad. I got to know apprentices on the project, and they all, you know, went from their different levels of the apprentices to journey out and, you know, became full-fledged journeymen. And you hear these stories. One that sticks out is there was a single mom. She made some poor life choices. She lived at a shelter while she was working on this project, and she was just trying to do something more for her and her child. And you realize that these businesses, you know, with this business going out of business or almost on the verge of going out of business, you know, they need advocates. They don't, you know, they're small businesses, they're run by one person or two people, and they don't have the resources that, you know, large firms have, right? So they need small business advocates. They need people that can mentor them. You also realize that the workforce you're hiring are just trying to make ends meet, and not too different from myself at the time. Like, I had small children and we were in a recession. It was a tough time. And despite all of these things that happened on that project, the prime contractor thought the project was a success because we hit all of our goals. So going forward, I wanted to make sure that the small business had an advocate, and that was going to be me. And I wanted to make sure that each and every worker on site had an advocate, especially the minority and women. And I realized, yes, that you have these goals, and yes, you have this responsibility to the company that you work for, but does it have to be this way? And so why can't we choose better? You know, the construction industry is really hard. So you have Joe, whose father is a superintendent, and then their cousin Bill works with them. And then you have these generations of families working in the trades, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there is something wrong if you hire your brother who isn't qualified over someone that is, right? Especially if someone that is qualified is a minority or woman. And this happens all the time. And, you know, the construction industry is a predominantly white male industry, and who's advocating for these minority and women? So I know that I have personally had a hard time in construction because I am a minority woman, and I've been extremely lucky to have mentors and people advocate for me. And so I really have just made a career of paying this forward. So, a lot of these businesses, they just need an opportunity to get their foot in the door. They're fully capable of doing the work, but a lot of the project teams that I work with are very focused on completing the project on time, under budget. So they go to their friends that they've used in the past, that they've established relationships with to get that going. So, you know, before I start with all of the interesting stuff and the slides to come, I just want you all to ask yourself why. Like, why are you here? Why are you doing this? What do you want to see as a change? You know, and keep that in mind when you're developing your vendor diversity programs. So next slide, please. Or, yeah. So we're going to go over certification requirements, certifying agencies and organizations, briefly touch on creating a vendor diversity program, reporting, and then what can you do. Next slide. So the federal government has a lot of diversity programs in place, and they're meant to increase opportunities for minorities and women, fight historic discrimination, encourage the development of these businesses so they can compete on their own. If you want some really fun reading, you know, search up the US DOT DBE program 49 CFR Part 26 or the Small Business Subcontracting Plan or the FAR. What's nice is it is a guideline of how to put these diversity programs in place in your company, but there's a lot of pages and a lot of little tiny letters on white pages. So you might need to drink some coffee to read that. Next slide, please. So some common certifications. So Washington State alone, we have a ton of certifying agencies. Like the city of Seattle will certify. You can get self-certified. I think King County has certification, but these are some common certifications that most businesses, or I guess if you work for an owner that has a program, this is what they're looking for. So disadvantaged business, minority business enterprise, women business, LGBT owned business, veteran owned, disability owned, small business, small disadvantaged business, and hub zone. Next slide, please. So here's some general requirements for the OMWBE, which is the Office of Minority Women Business Enterprise for Washington State. You have to be a minority or woman, own at least 51% of the business. And then I would make mental note of this gross receipts over 3 years, so 28.48 million. I'm not going to read the whole slide because there's a lot, but just some general guidelines. You have to be a minority or woman and you have to own 51%. Next slide, please. Small disadvantaged business and small business have some similar guidelines. And I've included links so you can take a look. It's really a lot of information, a lot of requirements, but all good information to know if you are working on those projects or working with an owner that requires this. Next slide, please. General requirements for veteran owned. I mean, this is probably one of the easiest ones. You have to be a veteran, right? And then you can get certified. And then there's additional requirements for service disabled, LGBT, disability. There's some more requirements. Next slide, please. Hub zone is an interesting one, but basically the main part is there's hub zone zip codes all throughout the United States, and they change every once in a while. So looking to see where the hub zone is, owning at least 51%, things like that. Next slide, please. So certifying agencies. Here is some common certifying agencies. The most important one is the OMWBE. I think that is probably that's the state certifying. So they do MBE, WBE, or MWBE. And those are state certifications. They also do a DBE certification, which is a federal. So also Washington DES, WeBank, and MSDC is more of a national certification. So is the veteran. Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs is on there. What's nice about all of these links and these certifying agencies and organizations is you're able to go to those websites and you can pull a directory of businesses that have been certified. So minority, women, you know, DBEs, anything you want, you can pull that and you can, you know, use that accordingly. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not sure what projects everyone is working on, but each owner is different and each owner has their own diversity program. And so the project that I'm currently working on is design build, and the owner has enforced the diversity program requirements on our architect. So our architect has embraced this program and is doing really well in breaking up responsibilities on the project and utilizing a lot of the minority and women-owned businesses to assist in the design process. So like they've hired structural engineering firm, signage consultant, acoustic engineer, BIM support, specifications, interior design and building code, and building code and fire consulting firm. So, and all these businesses are minority women-owned businesses, and they've hit their goals on the project. It's actually 20% minority business participation and 5% women-owned business participation. So they're doing really good. But I wanted to touch on this because creating your own vendor diversity program, you have to kind of ask a couple different questions. So is it owner driven? That's the biggest thing, right? If you're working for an owner that has their own program, I would follow their program. And then if it's something that internally you want to do for your company, you know, take a look at what you're doing right now, you know, establish a baseline, and then maybe establish some goals, you know, and what those goals are going to be, and make them realistic goals. You know, what is your firm able to do, and then you want to look at how are you going to achieve this goal. You know, what are you going to do? You can go to the OMWB website and pull that certification database. You can call everyone on there. You can attend outreach events. There's a lot of organizations, community organizations that support women and minority owned businesses. So you know, take a look at those. And then reporting and monitoring. If, like I said, if the owner has a program, go with what the owner says to do. You know, the federal government has their own program. You could do a combination of, you know, if you're following the federal government program, that's going to be a surefire way to, I mean, it's pretty much the strictest program, especially the US DOT program. So you could do that, or you can, you know, can make it however you want to and whatever works for your company. But what I would do is definitely take a look at, reevaluate, you know, every month or quarter or year, whatever works for you. But make note of what's working, what's not. Lessons learned, you know, just like that business that wasn't able to perform on that project. You know, what could have you done differently to make sure that that business succeeded working under you, right? So take a look at all those things. Next slide, please. Okay, so what can you do? Just keep in mind that these small businesses are small. You know, we have to be mindful of this. We have to, you know, sometimes it does require some handholding because they are doing everything. So you have to be patient with them. You know, I create relationships with these businesses. I get to know them. I get to know their story. And then I specifically introduce these businesses to my project teams, you know, so they can start building those relationships, because at the end of the day, I'm kind of the middleman, right? I'm the diversity manager. The project teams are the ones that are making the decisions. So they need to create those relationships. You network, you go out to outreach events, build relationships. Those are all different ways of getting involved. You can also incorporate this, like networking and building relationships, into your vendor diversity program. Mentoring is also a great opportunity to create a relationship with a small business. So it's up to you how far you want to take it. But, you know, it can be a meeting once a month, or you can just be there and be a resource for them if they have a question. But either way is helpful, you know. I think the most important one is get involved with the organization that supports minority and women-owned businesses. I was recently nominated and voted in on an organization to sit on a board. The organization is called AWMB or OMB. It's the Association of Women and Minority Businesses. I also am a part of Washington CDE. It's Washington Construction Design Entrepreneurs. It's really like 4 or 5 diversity professionals in construction that get together, and we host a meeting and try to do workshops for small businesses to kind of help them out. There's plenty of other local organization meetings that support women and minority businesses. So if you want any links, please let me know. And then also, just to reiterate, OMWBE has that directory that you can pull and find firms to look for. Another thing that people don't think of too is when you're getting more participation or you want to look for other businesses, like really take a look at what does your office use? You use office supplies. You have your lunches catered every once in a while. Just little things like that. You can purchase from minority-owned business or women-owned business. So this is really just all the tip of the iceberg for vendor diversity. Like we touched on certifications, creating a plan, how to find businesses, how to get involved, but there's still so much that I didn't talk about. Reporting could probably be a whole nother hour along with diversity compliance programs and what they mean. There's so many different things that you have to know. So just for now, if you are working on a project, and follow the owner's plan if there's a requirement. If not, and you want to pick my brain a little bit more, or you need some more information on any of these topics, just let me know. Please reach out to me. This next slide would be the question slide. So if you have any questions.
You guys did amazing on time. Literally just rock stars. 17 minutes left. So we will take all of the questions. And amazing job as well, Robin. You did great. I have plenty of questions if nobody does, but I'm going to check the chat box.
Do you want to do like a raise your hand, or how do you want to do questions? Just in the chat box?
I think just jump right in.
Well, since I already opened my mouth, right?
Exactly.
So hi, I'm Evie. I'm the head of administration at Weinstein AU, and I'm interested in some of your experiences, maybe pros and cons of various self-reporting on these cultural markers. To date, we really haven't asked people to talk about or document how they identify, particularly, race or other, sexual identity, things like that. And I'm interested in a sensitive way to navigate that in a way that does help promote our path, through the call to action and things like that, without polling things that maybe aren't applicable to the workplace.
I don't actually know the answer to that. I've heard from HR that sometimes if someone doesn't put anything under race or gender, they just make an assumption and guess. And I don't know if that's the right way to do it either. So
Yeah, I feel like I'm in the position of sort of looking around and like judging a book by its cover, and I'm not sure if it's really better to like ask for some self-reporting, or if that's not the way to go.
I would refer to your HR person, because I also think that there might be, I know that you can ask for it in the beginning when they sign up, onboarding, but I don't know, and there might be some laws against asking again. So I would defer to your HR person for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely not up on the law part of it and what's legal and illegal, but I would definitely be in the camp of having people self-identify. I think people are generally comfortable doing that, would prefer to pick their own label than pick from a list or check a box, if asked personally, or like provided a space where they could you could gather that data anonymously. So maybe it's not tied to a specific person, but you would still end up getting overall percentages for your office of different things. And you might end up with like a whole list, like some people might identify as Black and some people might identify as African American. But at least you would have something to go from and then not be in the awkward position of having to like figure it out.
I think
Yeah,
there's the other button or thing that you can check though, and a lot of people check other. And so then HR is in a weird position where they need to figure out what other they are.
Yeah, I would
Thank
like not put an other, but put like a blank and then
Right, a fill in.
write in what they want or write in like prefer not to say or something. But at least then they're able to say like I'd prefer not to say, instead of just the other blanket category is just like a little too.
There's so many multiracial people too. So,
yeah,
you know, what do we put?
that's what the blank is good for.
Yep.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Good question, ladies. I was curious, are there, you know, you mentioned like project audits, are there diversity consultants that could essentially like do a diversity audit, like if you are just starting or you have been making the efforts and just make sure you're on the right track, or is that something where you would like get a mentor?
There are diversity consultants out there. There's actually quite a few of them now. And they'll basically do what you need them to do, right? So if you want them to audit your program and see, I'm sure that can happen. I'm a firm believer, just establish a baseline, like see what you're doing, because you may not be, you may be doing really well, right? And not even know it. So establish a baseline and then kind of figure out, set some goals and see where you want to be.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Awesome. So you guys have some awesome certifications and background. So what about the people that are here and are interested in getting a certification? I think Robin, you've got some amazing ones. Do you guys have some recommendations for people of kind of what's out there and what's useful to employers and to themselves?
I can just go. So I attend a conference every year called the American Contract Compliance Association. And that it started out with a lot of the local agencies. So like your WashDOT or your Sound Transit, and a space for them to kind of get together and learn their, different parts of the regulations, like reporting and good faith efforts and all of these things. That conference has progressed, and if you attend that conference for 2 years, you get the credits, and Morgan State University gives you certification. But what's really nice is the classes are, it's a week-long conference. It's pretty brutal. You're, 7 in the morning and you're till late at night. Classes are 8 hours, you put in some work, but it's definitely beneficial. You may not know everything that's going on, but you do take back things every time you go. So if anyone wants some information on that, I can let you know.
That'd be awesome if you could include that and then the organizations that you're a part of, and I can send it with this. Thank you. We're starting to get some messages in the chat, so I'm gonna read Renee. I hope I pronounce it right. She says, I've worked with a variety of firms over the years, and even though 90% of the staff wants to move forward with DEI changes, I've always found it hard to get some owners on board. They are always focused on the main focus of the firm, which is to make money or the mission. And until we have their buy-in, I feel like we're swimming against the stream. Any suggestions?
I totally feel you. I think that having leadership as part of that kind of momentum is fully necessary. I feel like some ways that I've seen that in the past is having leadership partake in some of these trainings. I think if enough of the staff, like if 90% of the staff is asking for something, I'm hoping that that's kind of a red flag for leadership, because if their bottom line is like getting the job done and making money and doing good work, part of that is employee retention, like I think you could make the business case for why some of that stuff is necessary. If there truly is sort of just like a dysfunction in the workplace culture, that enough of the employees could speak to. And I've seen that manifest through like workplace satisfaction surveys, where you can put something out there and folks can anonymously kind of respond and speak their mind about what may or may not be working in the office. And I find that like people don't like to have a lot of turnover. And so if that feels like that might be the case, or you have like an avenue for better employee satisfaction, that's like one way to reach leadership.
I love the suggestion of the anonymous tips and surveys. Yeah, there's quite a few programs out there and companies who do that. So good thought. Crystal or Robin, anything to add on to?
I think it is very important that your diversity program is backed by your leadership. It just doesn't work if not. I work with a lot of project teams, and I find that the ones with the leader that embraces, each owner's diversity program are the successful projects. The ones that don't and think like, oh, whatever, we're not doing this, they're not successful. So I think it really stems with leadership, and maybe in this case, like just come to, get to know what the owner, like it's really hard to say, like you have to kind of find that common ground, right? Like what is gonna, how do you entice him to or her to want to buy into this? Like with the project teams, for me, I usually say, look, if you don't do this, maybe this owner's not going to want us to come back. This is very important. And that might be the case. I mean, you start talking about, oh, I might not get this money if I don't do this, then maybe that's the language that you need to speak, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really tough because everyone is, people are raised a certain way and they don't, we're all different, right? You just kind of have to figure out how to make that work and how to talk to them.
I've heard from so many of my peers also within NOMA and Diversity Roundtable that after George Floyd, their companies looked to them to be the DEI trainers, and we're just architects, we're not DEI trainers. So, but that was very common in a lot of companies to try and rally up the staff that were of color to do the work and not actually from leadership. But I think if you're going to ask your staff members to do this extra work about diversity training, you should compensate them for it at least.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad you brought up George Floyd. So what are your thoughts on the firms that they feel like they have a good effort, good processes, and say satisfaction's good, people feel included and belonging, and what about internal and external statements about things that are going on, current affairs that are sensitive? Because I've heard people or feel like their companies do a really good effort, but they're silent on things that are going on that are important, but they're not speaking about it. So if you're not doing it, how should you start? Or poking owners, or kind of what's your thoughts on that?
I don't know, I can jump in. I haven't thought much about it, but can just think on the fly.
Yeah.
I think yeah, I mean, I feel like firms that truly embody this type of thinking it's second nature to speak up when they see injustice happen. And it's in a way that isn't just, hopping on the bandwagon, like, let's get some marketing points. We're already doing this work. We're already working with these communities. We already have these staff members as part of our office. This is already important to us. So like, yes, we're gonna post, about how we don't stand for Asian American hate, like things like that come up. I think if you're, it sort of already has to be, part of the ethos of the office, or else then it does sort of feel like this superficial, like we're just kind of, virtue signaling a bit. So yeah, I wouldn't start there. That's not the place I would start. I wouldn't start by posting like Black Lives Matter, because that doesn't feel authentic, right? Like you got to start deeper. And then once that's already part of kind of your mission, vision, values, those things just come pretty seamlessly after that.
Flawless answer.
I mentioned before also like conducting a survey within your company and see where you stand now. You can survey your staff and see what they think. And I don't think there's a bad time to start, just anytime.
Totally. Lisa made a awesome comment in the chat box. She said, the way we're obligated to provide sexual harassment training, have any firms mandated similar annual training programs developed to help with unconscious bias of any kind and acceptance of each person as unique and individual, training to educate and improve workplace culture and awareness? Like California has a sexual harassment mandate for every 2 years. Are you seeing a mandate for this yet, or do you think maybe down the road?
I have seen that in a couple of firms doing a couple of mandatory training sessions, like a couple times a year.
Yeah, I have as well. I don't know if they're doing it annually, but at least like with new hires or anytime someone comes in, that they're making sure everyone has that similar training. But I think annually seems great, It's all work in progress for everybody.
Yeah, it needs to be ongoing though. I think if you do it once, like when you're hired, you're going to forget about it. So you need to keep it ongoing.
Yeah, we actually have unconscious bias training and more of like a diversity with the unconscious bias training. So I think it's really important. And I mean, unconscious bias, I think, is probably the basis of what starts all of this conversation, right? Because we're all products of our environment. And I actually have a really good link that I will share to the Harvard IAT link. I don't know if anyone has heard of that, but it's really just like a survey. You go in, you answer these questions about yourself, and then it tells you what your unconscious bias is. It's just a good exercise to kind of see like, okay, hey, like I acknowledge this, that I have this unconscious bias, and now I can work on that, so kind of for your own personal journey. But I'll share that with all of you.
That'll be much appreciated. I know we're running up. We got a minute left, and now you guys have a hard stop. So any last burning questions, comments before everyone hops off? All right, well, it looks like people are starting to hop off. So thank you guys. Thank you. Amazing job. Phenomenal. I will get this recording out along with the recommendations from these ladies. Thank you. Next one is in September 15th, and that's on cyber and IT best practices. And then end of the month, we have project life cycles, which will be up soon. So lots of exciting things. Thank you, ladies. Have a good day. Happy Thursday.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.